Welcome to Callis Mindset, where discipline meets growth. I'm Kannon Callis. Each episode, we sit down with real-world entrepreneurs, creators, and leaders who refuse to live life average. People who build things, shaping ideas and pushing themselves to grow. Today's guest is Andrew Freeman, founder of Freeman Creatives, a video production company helping businesses and brands tell powerful stories through media. Andrew and I actually go way back. We were both members of Phi Kappa Tau at University of North Texas. I've served as president right before him, and he stepped in right after me and served as president during spring 2015 when our chapter officially chartered. Later on, both of us were recognized for being part of North Texas 40, which highlights some of the university's top leaders. After college, Andrew pursued journalism through storytelling professionally, a path that took him from Oklahoma to upstate New York and eventually back to Texas, building experience in media and narrative along the way. Today, he's the founder of Freeman Creatives. He works with the Texas Freedom Network, and he's also a fiction writer and author of the fantasy series Wiss's Apothecary. So today we're talking about creativity, storytelling, and entrepreneurship, and the mindset it took to build something meaningful over time. Andrew, welcome to the show.
Ken, I'm so excited to be here. I've been really looking forward to this chat. Obviously, being one of the privileges of video production, working with you, we've talked about this a lot. So here we are.
Yeah, it's really good to have you here, and I've been looking forward to it as well. I wanted to start today with your story of creative origin. Where did you begin, and how did you decide, or what did you pursue in the creative element?
I have always seen myself as a creative. For not just struggling in math classes. I don't even mean just educationally, but I mean from a very young age. I started reading before most of my peers. I started writing before most of my peers. I'd write stories for my family, and then when I got into high school, I wrote my first book and got into newspaper, and so creating, using my imagination, escaping into a world that you can invent. That's always been something I've been drawn to and have enjoyed doing. And then the natural evolution when you get into, say, something like journalism, which was kind of a practical call, right? It was like, okay, I can write. I have this skill set. I can tell stories. How do I make a career out of that? And you know, everybody that loves to write books would love to say that they can make a career out of writing books, but that's not everyone could be Stephen King, And so the practical solution was news was something I really enjoyed too, lifting other people's stories up, and that kind of carried me right into my career.
Wow. So you've been interested since you were a young child, just all the different types of creativity, from drawing to writing to storytelling to just trying to capture moments or memories and how the feeling of the moment might be, and then using that, just the mindset behind openness to imagination. If you think about it, it's creativity. A lot of it comes from what can you imagine from nothing. And
Yes.
what time or what point of your life did you realize that using that creative element or that imagination could convert into something that could affect people? And you'll see the result of that. But how did that come about?
I mean, I've just always been a believer of, you hear this phrase all the time. Someone told me this very young too, right? Where it's like, if you do something you enjoy, you never work a day in your life, right? I mean, that's just you hear that said all the time. And for me, that was something I really wanted to pursue. I think about crafts like news and journalism, and writing, none of which, at least at first, pay very well. But for me, that was never the motivation. Can I can I tell stories every day? And if I can tell stories every day, will I be happy? And that's true, and that's taken me to a lot of places. But even right now, after leaving news, and I know we'll get into this later, but I left news after 10 years, and my work now, with small businesses and brands like yourself, and then my nonprofit work. I mean, the work is the same. I'm still telling stories, just in a little different way.
Yeah, that makes sense, and it's definitely effective. And communication is what I studied. And so, let's go back to college days. Were you an RTVF student?
UNT had a journalism program that had the Mayborn School of Journalism. So, uh, right out of going into college, I knew I wanted to get in journalism. But I don't say this in a sad way, but in high school, like I said, I wrote a book, and I knew I wanted to be an author. And again, we'll talk about Welcome to Whistles Apothecary later, I'm sure. But my goal was always to be an author. But my parents had a really serious talk with me, and they're like, "Look, being an author is great, but like, how are you going to pay the bills? When you go to college, are you really going to go to college for, say, a creative writing degree?" And right about the same time, I was in journalism in high school. This is taking a little back before college, but I was entering state competitions and doing pretty well. I won some pretty nice awards for my news writing in high school. And so when I went into college at UNT, having a very nice journalism program, it felt like a very natural transition of, okay, well, maybe I'll do news. And it's just funny how things continuously evolve, because even then, when I first entered college at UNT, I thought I would be doing newspaper writing. And then I took a broadcast journalism class and fell in love with that. I fell in love with the video side of, like, okay, you're telling a story with words, but now you're also telling a story visually too, uh, and putting those things together, and that was really attractive to me at the time too. And so I graduated with a degree in broadcast journalism, and I also studied communications and political science.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, the Mayborn School is really prestigious. They're one of the top schools in Texas, and I'm sure that also built a resume to open doors for your future jobs and having those conversations. But while you were in school, you also held several other elective, choice leadership roles, and you kind of chose to go the organizational development path, like I did, where we joined an organization that was still in the startup phases, kind of in the rudimentary stages of getting started. And the leadership experience that came from that, it probably also created opportunities, through building confidence, building that social ability to connect with others through different organizations and leadership roles. And you also stepped into the top role at our organization, Phi Kappa Tau, as the president of the fraternity. What was that like during that moment when you were pursuing your studies, but you're able to also build a almost like a separate major it's not really recognized, but it's a leadership role in an organization on campus?
I remember my freshman year getting a presentation about Greek life and all the advantages that joining a fraternity, beyond just the brotherhood. And it's not this like model of paying for friends, right? I mean, there's really deep connections that could be made that follow you for life, and you have a support network always. That really appealed to me, and chatting with you guys, you, Anthony, and it's funny, we have that connection of we actually went to the same high school, and and so I think we were in different circles then, but coming to high school and then getting to meet you and Anthony and Johnny and Nick, Alex, all these great guys that really welcomed me. It wasn't so much about, oh, here we are building a fraternity. That is exciting, but I mean, you connect with people first and foremost, right? And the energy and the excitement that everybody had of like, hey, we're building this fraternity together. We're taking this challenge, and this is something that we're going to get to do together. That was what was most exciting about that. It's funny, like, because I did want to get involved, and I did fall into leadership positions pretty quickly, but that almost felt incidental. Like it felt like, you know, I was your vice president when we got chartered, and then I was president when we chartered. And certainly those were aspirations when I got there. But I mean, my first chair was brother chair, and it was organizing camping trips, and and then I did recruitment chair, and it was getting other people to get excited about Fat Capital, like we were, like, and there was just this natural evolution where I just kept getting deeper and deeper and deeper, and then all of a sudden I'm like, wait, I'm president. Like I was like, how do we get here?
Yeah, it's true. And there's something to be said about when you all have a common goal, and when you're all going through a similar phase of life, like you're the same age, or, for example, we're all undergrads at the same university, and we're all on the same team, it felt like, and the support system. It creates a collective energy that is more than what just one person can do. I definitely resonate with other people's energies a lot, where if someone else is high energy, I'm going to be automatically lifted up to a higher energy. If someone else is lower energy, I'm like a sponge. I kind of are a mirror almost. I mirror energies. And when you have so many different personalities and character types and, levels of that, you really can just you feed off other people, and you see other people with goals, and you want to do, it's almost like an expectation. We had a really high standard of what we were doing. And there's a reason that you and I were both nominated to North Texas Top 40 Leaders. During the same time period, we were recognized as top 40 leaders on the campus of over 40,000 students. That's a really, really high honor. I really did appreciate that recognition. And I know that, that's something that it was almost like a long-term goal, but at the same time, you weren't doing what you're doing just for that. That was almost a side effect of the journey that you were already on.
Right.
What does that recognition mean to you when you were brought into that organization?
I mean, it did mean a lot. I mean, you're talking about the top, uh, 40 leaders on campus. I mean, that was quite the distinction. But it kind of goes to what you were saying, where like I also feel like I'm a sponge around the people that I'm around. And so when I'm around super motivated people that are all wanting to succeed, which is, I mean, you think about it, we got the honor of being an NT40, which is great. But our fraternity was full of leaders, because it was full of people who were all saying, yes, let's build this fraternity together. There's plenty. If you just wanted to join a fraternity, there were a dozen other organizations you could just fall in line with. But our fraternity was full of people that were saying, like, no, we don't want to do that. Let's do our own thing, and let's do it together. And so it primed me for NT40 in a way, because now you have NT40, and that's also another organization that's full of leaders, that they're the top of their organizations, and they got the top grades on campus and that kind of thing. And you're just like, really, it was almost like, oh man, I better like live up to these expectations. Like it was a lot of pressure to like almost this, like, again, imposter syndrome, where you're just like, man, like I have to keep up now. Like if my grades fall, or whatever, what does that say?
Yeah, it's true. People know when you're in the spotlight, or when you're in elite organizations, that everyone has a high level of accountability, responsibility, and standards. If you fall off in any of those, categories, people will see it. And so I get what you're saying there with the expectation, a little bit of pressure, but you know, people that are leaders and people that are really growing and challenging themselves, they're gonna they're going to grow under pressure, just like they say like diamonds are formed under pressure, right?
Yeah.
It's corny, but at the same time, it's kind of true in real life. If you can clutch out, if you can push it through, and you can keep showing up every day under pressure, and you can deal with stress, and you can deal with, you know, just the different distractions and challenges, then something good is going to happen.
I mean, it really does pay dividends where, I mean, I've visited you in Colorado. I'm in Anthony's place for the Super Bowl every year. Yeah, I'm here in Austin, and the people I hang out with every week, you know, fraternity guys. Yeah, so like these really were lifelong connections that I'm so thankful for so many more reasons than, oh, how many presidents of the United States were in a fraternity. If you want to be a president of the United States, get into, yeah, like, and it's like I don't have those aspirations at all. But what the thing that stuck with me more than anything is the bonds that you form, and knowing that there are people, capable people, that are in your corner when you need them the most.
Yeah, there's memories that we've got, other brothers have, that would have never existed if we weren't on pursuit of that track. And I'm thankful for that opportunity, but it creates a level of expectation and confidence in yourself when you have challenged yourself from a young age, or, you know, from teenage years or whatever years those were. You get confident with challenging yourself and growing and hitting goals and hitting targets. And I think that a lot of people, they underestimate what they can do long term, but they overestimate what they can do short term. So they give up pretty quickly. But we had those long term goals. It took us 4 years.
And not to add to the things that we're talking about, but I think about one of the other big things that was happening at the same time as the fraternity that was also really shaping my character, was in high school. I started martial arts, and I've been practicing martial arts for, since 2011. I'm a third degree black belt in Ishinru karate. I've been doing that for, and again, it's also one of those things where, as a third degree black belt, I look to the left of the line and I look at all the other black belts and yellow belts and white belts that are lower than me, and I'm like, when did I get here? like wait, like, what's happening? But on the dojo, every day you get on the floor, there's only one person that, like, you're trying to beat, and that's yourself. That's the version of you that was on the dojo floor the night before, or the day before, or whatever. And so every day the goal is to be a better version of yourself than you were before. And then you apply that to school, or building a fraternity, or starting a business, writing a book. I mean, these are all skills that they definitely all influenced each other. I mean, the fraternity gave me skills, the same skills, but it's just like this compound effect.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it was at that time of life, I was also trying to be an amateur bodybuilder. So, you know, it's the disciplines and the things that you can repeat, the habits and the choices that you make to compound long term. And before you know it, you look back and you're like, how did we get here? Like, how has it been that long? How have I known you for almost 15 years? You know, but things just progress forward, but they're understood backwards. And so it's one of those things where I did the same thing. I always wrote my goals either on the mirror or the whiteboard. I'm not looking at Instagram for who I want to be like. I'm not thinking that there's some definition of perfection out there that I can hit. I'm just trying to be better every day. And when you do that, you form belief and a mind connection. Like, engineering in your head changes. You know, like when you see these micro wins and then they become macro wins, you start believing like, oh, wow, if I really apply myself and I reverse engineer what success looks like, I can get there by hitting these milestones.
And we say that in the dojo all the time, right? The small things make the big things happen. And that isn't just, when you're talking about an application of self-defense, where the small things really do make the big things happen, but even just, again, that mindset of character, and that mindset of you're taking a step forward every day. And then again, you do get to the point where you look behind you, you're climbing up this mountain or whatever, and each second is torture, but eventually you get to a point, you look back and you're like, whoa, yeah, I've made it far. And it's just because you were doing one hand in front of that, one foot in front of another, and that builds up.
So true. Well, I want to go back right after college and revisit your early journalism days. You had gone out of state, for a contract. So what did you see out there? Where were you? And tell me about that.
Yeah. So my first job out of college was in Southern Oklahoma, Ardmore, where again you have another spooky connection to, and it was a small market. And at the time, especially coming out of college, being in the Southern Oklahoma, I was like, oh my God, there's nothing to do here. Like this, like this place isn't for me. And I was really counting down the end of my 2-year contract there. But thinking back now, I'm very grateful for that time, because that was a great market. I was lucky to work for a very good newsroom that really helped build my chops very quickly. I think I learned more about journalism that first 6 months than 4 years of college, whatever that says about our education system. But like it really prepped me, and I really learned a lot. And then I went from there to upstate New York. On the other hand, really far away from home, and that was difficult in its own way. But upstate New York is gorgeous. 4 seasons. You see, there was a novelty every year that it started snowing, sometimes by Halloween, and you're just like, whoa, this is snow. Coming from Texas. And then the fall, where just all of these beautiful colors. We were up by the Finger Lakes, and during the summers, I would go to the park that was walking distance from my house, set up a hammock, and read for like 6 hours, because it didn't get dark till like 9 p.m. and it was August and it was 75 degrees. Like it was I really enjoyed my time in upstate New York. And so when the pandemic started, I originally signed a 3-year contract, and then the contract ended right kind of in the middle of the pandemic. And so not the time to be traveling across the country, or whatever. So I re-signed another contract, and I ended up being there for 5 years, before I finally got the opportunity to come home to Austin. But another 5 years that I'm very grateful for. I wrote my first book there. I met my editor there, who he edits my books. But I mean, we also, like, even though I've moved back here to Austin, we still meet virtually for tea. Yeah, he's got some tea, I've got some tea, and we're drinking. And that's because in my neighborhood, I had this cute little tea bar that was, again, walking distance. New York's very walkable. And I would walk to this tea bar, and it became kind of this third place. Happy Earth Tea. I really urge people to look it up and support the entrepreneurage there, because they're all such great, kind people. But when I first walked in, it was like, yeah, can I have a tea with sugar? Like, it was very Texas, like I expect an iced tea, and there's a whole art to it. And so that, like, I got immersed into that world, and I met so many people like my editor through that world. It's important they say, to have a third place, like a place that's not work, that's not your home, that you can go to interact with and be with people and experience community. And I very much had that in Rochester, which made my 5 years there pass pretty well. But I mean, serious journalism happened there too. I mean, the pandemic and the George Floyd protests, which happened there in Rochester. I got tear gassed. I got pepper bullets to my back, like from, and you're there and you're watching history unfold. It's kind of spooky, going back to something we were talking about offline on Facebook. While I was there in Ardmore, Oklahoma, there was this really sad story about a missing teenage girl and her friend, and they'd been missing since 2013, and I got there in like 2016, so they'd already been missing for 3 years. And just last month of this year, they think they may have found the bodies. And that's 10, it's been 10 years since I've been there, and they've been missing for 13. And so all these all this really heavy news, all this really important news, um, it really helped further develop my character, and I think it helped me become more empathetic, and more understanding, more patient, because in journalism you were like all of a sudden every day you're confronted with people that are in different situations than you, with different life outlooks than you, different, I mean, from politicians to people that are defaulting on rent, that are living in apartments that have black molds because their landlords aren't taking care of them the way they should be. Like you're seeing all of this, and it really expands your worldview of the narratives that are out there, and how important everybody's story and voice is.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And through that experience and seeing the human experience through different stories and different eyes and different platforms and just different experiences that you and I wouldn't possibly ever have, it's cool to see the collective feedback and the stories, and just it really just shapes you probably as a person to understanding and being more, like you said, empathetic, communicating with different types of people and their different personalities and different situations. And that kind of leads me to, your creative communication and, what you're putting out into the world with Wiss's Apothecary. How long has this book been, in your mind before you got to writing, and how did that come to be?
So Welcome to Wiss's Apothecary was born out of the pandemic. Like I think a lot of projects for a lot of people, are the pandemic happened, and some people really got into sourdough. Some people became alcoholics. For me, the pandemic happened, and I was like, you know what? Now is, if any, a time to write. And I remember being at the airport waiting for my flight that had gotten delayed, of course, to get home to Dallas. And it kind of just, I was bored, and I was like, well, you know what? Let me write a a story about a witch would be cool. And I had been consuming a lot of I mean, the book I wrote back in high school, which was never published, I mean, it was just something I wrote, was also fantasy. I've loved writing fantasy. I grew up reading Harry Potter. Like I felt like I followed Harry Potter through school, because when I read that first book when I was 11 and he was 11, and then the second book I was 12 and he was 12. So like a lot of kids our age, that was my story, right? Getting into fantasy through something like Harry Potter. And so I've always loved magic. I've always loved fantasy. I've always read fantasy. And then right about that time, I had been consuming a lot of different media about witches, and I was like, I'd love to write my own story about a witch. And so I started writing right there in the airport terminal, and as I was writing, the story kept evolving, and then I landed and I kept writing. And then I came home and I kept writing. And then all of a sudden I'm like, whoa, I'm actually getting pretty far in this. And I'm like, you know what, if I can finish this, I'd like to try to get it published. Um and it feels like a cop out answer to say something like, "Oh, it just came to me." Like that sounds a little pretentious. I think there was more to it than that. But at when you have, I think, a creative spark, when you have like this fire that for whatever reason at that moment you feel full of creative energy and you capitalize on it, that's where anybody can, you take that energy and you can apply it to anything, and people do every day. But for me, like, that's what I applied it to in that moment, was this book. And since then, I've published two. I'm working on my third right now. I'm hoping to get it published, this spring. And it again, it's just crazy to think about, like, wow, how this came. And in 2021, shortly after I published the first book, one of my very good friends, who is a brother to me, passed away. He got in a motorcycle accident, and it was crazy to me how that impacted then the second book, where almost as I'm writing these books, they become almost like these capsules in time of where I am in life, because that first book is very chipper and light and fun, and then the second book gets a little heavier, and it gets a little dark is not the right word, because it's a light fantasy. I mean, it's not a dark, it's the genre's cozy fantasy, you know what I mean? It's a coming of age story about this young witch's apprentice who helps her teacher run a potion shop, which I realize we haven't talked about yet. But so like every story, it's about just a different person that's in need of some help, and here's this well-intentioned but sometimes naive apprentice who goes above and beyond to help those in need. Misadventures ensue. That's kind of the premise here of this story. But then you get in that second one, and I'm dealing with the loss of my friend, and that like impacted the work. And then now here I am on the third one, and all these changes in my life that I've experienced in the last couple of years. In this third book, my apprentice is also going through some like very big changes, and that wasn't conscious. You know what I mean? Like, what's funny is that wasn't intentional, but it's the way that maybe the subconscious works, or whatever. It's therapeutic, and it
Yeah.
puts, it is almost a mirror of things that I am in my personal life experiencing.
Yeah, and that's the definition of art. It is taking what's in here and externalizing it, whether that be audio, visual, writing, creative, poetry. There's different ways to express that. And
Journaling, people journal, you know what I mean?
yeah, journaling, playing instruments, like there's so many different ways that are outlets for that. And I think it says a lot about the mindset that you are carrying in that moment can affect the mood of the book, or the mood of the song, or the mood of your work even, and how you communicate. It tells a story in itself. It's kind of unique how that works. So what do you think it is that draws humans to the fantasy worlds? I know in my life, I've read a lot of fantasy books, most of Harry Potter's, Narnia's, all the Goosebumps, like Animorphs, all the different stuff from when we were young. But I
Yeah.
also was really heavily committed to playing video games, and where there's online worlds of fantasy, you can build a character and just succeed in a different element. And how do you think that the fantasy world has affected humanity, especially as we go forward, to where it just seems like the immersive experience is just like unreplicated? Like, we're getting to the technology stages where you can literally almost immerse yourself in these environments.
Yeah, because I think like art is intrinsically human, right? I like, not to get too philosophical in this moment, but I think like art is obviously what sets humans apart, in that, like you said, I'm doing part of art when I write the book. But then there's a other half in an equation I cannot control, when someone reads my book, or someone listens to a song, or someone looks at a piece of art on the wall. They're interpreting it through their own lenses, and the author or the creator of that art created it through their own lenses, and then that's where humanity connects, somewhere in the middle, right there in that beautiful space. And so when you're talking about fantasy, when you're talking about imagining a world that could be, that doesn't exist, but is fantastic and epic, and you've got elves and fire bolts and like some Dungeons and Dragons stuff, which is also really blown up in the last 5 years. People really getting into that, what you were talking about, creating a character and having role playing, because I think we want that escape. And everybody finds that escape, whether through sports or through meditation, yoga, whatever. We need an ability to detach from reality, because certainly right now in 2026, but always and throughout the entire history of the world, reality is a lot. Like for just for everybody, reality is a lot. And so to have somewhere where you can escape into, whether that's a video game or a book or uh, a song, that's so important. And so it's not just writing that I think creates fantastical worlds. I think you've got you've got like classic artists like Led Zeppelin, who created almost these fantastical worlds through their music, and you have art that depicts fantastical worlds that goes back to basically as old as humans could have drawn, because as humans we always have liked to imagine, and imagination spurs innovation, right? Imagining what could be all of a sudden creates what is. And so and that's why the line between um reality and science fiction closes every day, because someone had to imagine it first, and it is, as a species, as a human race, allowed us to progress. And it starts with something as innocuous as imagining a fantastical world where there are creatures called elves and dwarves, and that can shoot lightning bolts from their fingertips.
Yeah, that's so true. And that there's a big business in that. Let's actually talk about the business side, because you founded Freeman Creatives, and I was just curious, what made you decide to start your own creative company?
So after 10 years of news, you know, I had seen a lot, I had done a lot, and I was able to kind of really check off every item that I had on my list of things. The goal was to always come back to Texas to report in Austin, and I got to do that, and I was very thankful for that. After 10 years, I made it happen. But you know, I don't know if as humans we're meant to be sedentary, and there was just, and this would be a whole other podcast topic in of itself that we won't get into much. But I mean, the reality of today, the reality of living in 2026 is journalists as really a nonprofit arm. You're making ad revenue, that's what funds your news station or your newspaper, whatever, and that dwindles every year. And so budgets are tight and the news evolves. I was in broadcast news, television news, which almost feels like being a newspaper writer on the cusp of radio. Like radio did not kill newspaper, and television didn't kill radio, and the internet is not killing television. But all of these things evolved, and the way people consumed news evolved. And so I'm in a position after 10 years where news wasn't as fulfilling as it used to be, and I wasn't as happy as I used to be, and I certainly wasn't comfortable in life. I wasn't. The biggest irony was here I am in Austin finally after 10 years, and I'm struggling to pay rent, and I can't even afford to step outside of my apartment. And so it's like my contract came to an end, and we had negotiations about re-signing, but it really came down to, like, what am I doing this for? We're on this planet for such a short amount of time. It's like I need to be doing something that I can feel fulfilled about. I mean, that's why I got in journalism in the first place. And so to have that 10 years of news, I mean, obviously it's something I'll always be grateful for, and you never say never. So I have no idea where the next 10 years are going to take me. I have no idea where the next 10 years are going to take me, but I'm very much trying to go with the flow is here. And it felt like, when I was in New York, and they took away our cameras and gave us cell phones, and we're like, here's how you're shooting the news now. You're editing the newscast on an iPad. I went with it. You know what I mean? I was like, okay, let me go with this, because this is, let me go with that. And then I got to Austin and did that, and realized, what, maybe it's time for something new. And so I left. But now here's the problem. I have 10 years of experience shooting video, editing video, writing stories. What am I going to do with that experience? and so, I started having conversations with people like yourself right here in my life. Again, maybe going back to what we were talking about the beginning. Thank God we have people we can depend on, because now you're in a position where you're trying to grow your business, you're trying to scale. I have in need of, I'm thinking, okay, what can I do with my skills of video editing and whatever? And we're having a conversation, and there are so many people that were like it. It really started to grow pretty organically. I mean, even before Freeman Creatives launched, over the last summer, I was with a comedian on 6th Street doing stuff for him. And it was really freelance, what it comes down to. You know what I mean? I was doing freelance work. But because I had these skills, and one thing like I just really pride myself on is being a storyteller. I've always loved telling stories. I think maybe it's this one thing in this life that I'm like just truly good at. Like if I could take a second to pat myself on the back for anything, it would be my ability to tell stories. And so Freeman Creatives, again, was kind of this go with the flow evolution of, okay, well, maybe this is now, okay, I'm writing my books. That fits kind of neatly under Freeman Creatives. And I'm working with small businesses and brands like Kannon Real Estate. That fits under Freeman Creatives. And I'm still continuing that today, but then, I got an opportunity to do advocacy work with a nonprofit full time, and something I'm very passionate about. And that also felt foolish to turn down that opportunity. So now it's like, okay, how can I make both of these worlds work? And it is. And I think what's really exciting about being in survival mode for as long as I was, I feel like this last 6 months and going into this year, 2026, really feels like a season of growth. And I've been really growing exponentially. And that's really exciting, because I was, not to bum anyone out, but I was deeply unhappy, I think, for a very long time. And now it's like, oh yeah, this is what normalcy feels like. This is like what being fulfilled, feeling happy feels like. And you're like, wow, like that cloud had been hanging over me for a long time, and I didn't realize it.
Yeah, that happens to, especially when you get into the same type of schedule, or you're the same habits, the same routines daily, and then it creeps up, and before you know it, you're like, I'm not actually feeling the way that I expected to. And it's about the path that you're on, or what you're giving your energy to. If you feel like your attention is worth it at that point, based on what you truly would want to do in life. If there was no money, if there was no job required, like what would we do with our time? And the closer we can get to that, which is something you mentioned earlier, if you love what you do, you don't feel like you're slaving over a job to make some company money, right? Like it's really personal, and that can make a big difference. And I've watched the whole thing happen. I've been here, and it's really cool to watch that, because I've been on a similar journey where I've left full-time work for companies and gone into my own, you know, company creation and entrepreneurship journeys. And it's still figuring things out right now, but it's a lot more promising this year after the experience from the last couple of years, trying things and challenging it.
And I mean, that's what I was, that's why I'm so thankful too, to have those people in my life, because I am watching you do the same exact thing. And I can see, I'm like, wow, Cannon's on like this very similar trajectory, this very similar life path. And not only is it just obviously very exciting to be working with you again after, we worked together in college and built a fraternity together. And now I can support you building, you know, your real estate empire here, and that's fulfilling in of itself. But I mean, there's again what we're talking about, like at NT40, when you're rubbing shoulders with people that are doing that same thing, and you're like, you surround yourself with people that are all comfortable, and then maybe you fall into comfort. And then how long did it take before I was like, yeah, let me try to scale this up, and let me see where this can go. And that, came to just us being in each other's orbit.
So true. And when you're in a network of people that are taking risks and challenges and taking, things and matters into their own hands through creativity, through entrepreneurship, or through just doing things their way, which may be different than what the status quo has been, but if you find a way to succeed, that's what your path is. And you've been there for me in a lot of ways along the way, especially growing these real estate businesses, the property management business, but also you're my editor for this podcast. So that's a cool thing, right? Like it's cool that now I get to have you on the podcast, but you're also, one of the partial founders, if you think about it, not just the fraternity, but the podcast came to light because of your work as well. So it's meaningful, it's impactful. And, the show is called the Callis Mindset. So I always like to talk about discipline and showing up. Creativity is also, a lot of times creativity is seen as spontaneous, but how much of creativity is actually discipline?
I think that's a great question, because it's a great point that I don't think I've even considered before. I think there definitely absolutely is a connection between creativity and discipline, and because they're one and the same, in the sense that being creative, which is like, you look at the root of that word, to create, to build, I mean, that's not easy. If you are walking a trail, and you're just following the path that has already been carved for you, how many people are gonna look at the brambles and the trees and the brush and the thorns and go, well, you know what, I could go that way. Like that takes work. I mean, and it takes, you have to be able to want to do that work, and you have to be able to execute that work. And I think obviously everybody's capable of it, but it's like going to the gym. You have to make a conscious choice. But using myself as a case study, if I'm playing so many video games that I don't have time to write, aren't I shooting myself in the foot? You know what I mean? Like, and so you need the discipline. It's so much easier to get home after a long day at work and fire up a video game than it is to sit down at my blank Microsoft document and start writing the next page of my book. So you have to have the discipline to write, like you have to have that discipline to say, no, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to get this done.
It's a great way of putting it. And actually, I can use myself as a case study in this too, because people might not know it, but I'm a big gamer too. Like, I love specific role-playing games long term. They're almost impossible to beat. They take thousands of hours. They're strategic,
Sure.
but to me, that's fun. It's like playing chess almost, but different.
Yes.
And I loved it since I was a kid. Like, since I was a child, I've really enjoyed playing those types of games. But the amount of hours that it takes,
you can get sucked in.
You get sucked into you're paying them to take your time, and it's pixels on a screen, and it's goals that maybe build the mental fortitude to sit there for the time it takes. But unless you convert those same disciplines, or whatever that builds into real world, it could hold you back actually, because you're spending time not building something. And I had to take a break from gaming really the last year and a half almost. It's been, and since then these businesses have started to grow, but I got into the point where in my full-time jobs I could get my work done very quickly, and I would always hit my goals. And so leisure time a lot of times is spent just playing games and having kind of fun and giving myself a mental break, which wasn't really a break because it's strenuous activities, like long hours. Like, it felt like it was a break, and it gave me, some serotonin boosts and some, pixel endorphins. But at the same time, I want to go back and play. Like, I miss it.
Yeah,
So the discipline to choose what you're going to do with your time and prioritize what you really want out of the sacrifice that you're taking to do what it takes to get what you actually want long term. And today that's so difficult when we're all, there's billions of dollars going for our attention every day.
sure. I mean, how much time we spend doom scrolling, on our phones, because it's like each swipe is a dopamine hit. Yeah, and those algorithms know how to like hit our dopamine, and it's so easy to just lay there in bed all morning on your phone when really, and again, look, you can enjoy anything with moderation, right? Whether that's phone, video games, alcohol, whatever it is. I think moderation is always the key. So being on your phone is not a problem. Spending, all morning in your bed till 11 a.m. Like, that might be a problem.
So true. Yeah, everything in moderation. I am a very balanced person, I'll say. Like, I'm definitely far from perfect, but I am somewhat balanced on when I do something. I don't, do it so hard or whatever it is, like spend that much time. Like, gaming used to be this way where I would just pull all-nighters,
Yeah,
like when I was younger, I would just pull all-nighters to get a leg up, whatever it takes to win. I'm that competitive, right? And so
yeah,
whether it's online, in sports, in music, in business, like, I'm just a very competitive person, and that can also lead to burnout, which I've had several times. And so have you ever had a moment where you didn't feel the energy, the creative spark that you were talking about, and you had to still show up, or you still had to find a way to reframe that mindset? And how did you do that?
yeah. I mean, all the time, really. But when I think about, not even my book, even going back to, okay, I left news, and then I had, because I was in a position to do so, um I had some good savings that lasted me a few months to give me time to get my feet out under me, and to find other work. And I didn't. I struggled to find work, you know what I mean? And so now I had all this time on my hands, and I really had to build a schedule for myself, because I very quickly was mismanaging my time. I really was I was sleeping in and staying up late, and playing video games for 6 to 8 hours because I could. And then, you know, as my work continued, I this wasn't sustainable. I quickly realized, like, this is not sustainable. I need, even if I don't have a job, I need discipline. I need structure. And one thing that I've always been good about since like my high school days, back when I had a a, a planner. You know what I mean? Like, I have to just be somebody that structures my days. If I don't set alarms on my phone and just say, look, from your video game times from 8 p.m. to midnight, or whatever, or I need to go groceries shopping at this time, like, because if I do not put it in the calendar, if I do not put it in a planner, if I do not write it down, it's not getting done. And I don't know if that's not, if I have self-control issues or whatever it is, but like, I need have things written down and stick to a schedule, and then you can mentally prepare yourself, right? So I'm a night owl. My job with TFN right now, which again is very fulfilling work, nonprofit work, which is, it's a new world for me being in the nonprofit space. But I was a nightside reporter. I worked from 2 p.m. to 11 p.m. Now I'm at a job that expects me in the office at 9 a.m. But I am a night owl. And really, I get my most creative work done at night. Like, I almost, it's weird. Like, I'm just wired that way. I come alive in the middle of the night. And so to say, like, okay, every night, Andrew, from midnight to 2 a.m., you're going to write your book. And it's only 2 hours. You're not going to write a lot. But again, that adds up. Like, if I can mentally prepare myself and say from midnight to 2 a.m. every night, you're going to write. Before you know, you're going to have a finished book on your hands. Yeah, like, and so having, I need to give my, like, on one hand, I feel like a very undisciplined person because I have to have these systems in place, because I can't just say, oh, guys, I'm getting off. I have to have an alarm to tell me to get off, because if I don't, like, it's not going to happen. Like, on one hand, that makes me feel very undisciplined. On the other hand, I am proud of myself for at least recognizing and putting these systems in place that allow me to be a more productive version of myself and a more creative version of myself, because again, video games gives you the same exact dopamine that writing does, right? And so, like, why I'm spending, we only have so much finite energy every day, right? And it's just about how are you going to spend that energy, and it's just making sure you are, just like money in a budget, allocating these things in a sustainable, responsible way.
Yeah, you just shared a key point there. And I think it's one that is very self-aware. You have to be able to identify what guardrails or what safeguards or what governors that you need to place systematically in your life. Because I'm the exact same way. If I don't write it down, it's not getting done. Like, I write down every single
Yes.
thing I do every single day for the last almost 15 years. And it's allowed me to get more done, because if I don't get something done that day, it goes to the very next day. And so it's about time blocking, prioritizing your own, I won't call it really a weakness, but just knowing your characteristics of where you're going to spend time if you're not governed, or if you're not reminding yourself through tasks and, reminders, alerts, whatever that might be, time blocks on your calendar. But I live by my calendar too, and
Yes.
it's impossible to not do that if you're running a business, in my opinion. If you're running one business, two business, three businesses, you've got personal life, you've got kids, you need to do the most you can with your time, because it is finite and we all have the same amount. So why is it some people can do this over here, but other people are not doing much?
Mm-hmm.
It's the freedom to spend that time how you need to get where you want to go.
I just think, obviously, what does it say about us and our trajectory that we have a very similar way of doing things? But for me, it's balancing now full-time work with writing a book and doing my Freeman Creative stuff, whether that's, okay, I'm making time to edit a podcast for you, or a YouTube video for somebody else, and I still need time to write myself. Like, I need that structure to get it all done. My dad's coming in town this weekend, and I'm plotting out today, right? Like, okay, I've got to do this podcast episode with Kannon. I still need to edit an op-ed for Texas Freedom Network, and then I need to clean my house. And you write these things down, because you're like, this is how. I would be very overwhelmed, and nothing. Yeah, I would have constant paralysis of maybe just doom scrolling on my phone and getting nothing done if I didn't have that level of organization.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think that is probably, it comes from, taking on a lot of responsibility. You have to adapt to become the person that can handle what you've taken on, or what you've promised yourself or other people. or what commitments that you've taken your responsibility,
Yeah.
on yourself. And so we started doing that at a young age, we really did. And so it's cool to see that we do have different personalities, but we have a lot of crossover experiences in life along the entire time since we were kids, basically, from being in the same school system for grade school, the same college, university, plus fraternity, plus elite organizations on campus, plus positions within the fraternity. And then I studied communication, which was right next to the Mayborn School of Journalism. And there was a lot of crossover there with students that I had classes with, around some of the communication requirements. But then to see the other side was really cool too. And I think you saw a lot more of that than I did.
I mean, I think, and it's not even just about like creating. Like I think about my senseis, my karate instructors, who for the last 20 years have done their kata every morning. That's how they start their morning, is with their kata every single day. And they are masters that they're in their 60s, and they look early 50s, late 40s. Yeah, like it's nuts, because like for them, that's how they're using energy, towards fitness and health. And one of my senseis, she's always sending us motivational YouTube videos. Watch this, or check out this study on the she shared with me once a recipe for a green smoothie that I still make almost every week to this day from years ago, because they're so committed to that holistic lifestyle. I mean, they're martial artists through and through, and martial art had that art is in that as well, because there's an art form to that. And so in a way, they are artists, they're musicians professionally, which is also so they are artists too. My point being that it's not about, it could be anything. When you're applying this level of discipline and dedication to a craft, no matter what it is, that's how you see results.
That's exactly right. And creating the mindset behind that is an art as well. It's an ongoing discipline process. And that's really what I'm trying to share with our listeners. And anyone who I'm having on this podcast has either reflected that, or they can analyze it with me, and we can discuss through experience and storytelling, and just making points that could resonate with other people who are wondering, how can I do this, or how can I get from here to there, or let's listen to other people's stories and their experiences. And I relate them a lot to my own life. When I hear your story, I can see myself in you, and when I see other people, I try to kind of swap shoes with them to understand where they're coming from. And communication is a huge part of that. But we don't have many other topics today, but I want to let you have a chance to shout out for your books and any other, your media company, and tell people where to go to find you.
Well, I guess I would like to do that. I just, and in closing, I guess one final thought would be about, we've been using the word discipline a lot, but that is just an interchangeable word for mindset, right? And I think that's so important when we're talking around that issue of, when we're talking about putting up guardrails and creating systems for yourself and having that discipline. That's just what we're talking about is mindset. My senseis have a mindset when they wake up every morning and do their kata, and you have a mindset when you're making calls every day on your properties, and I have to have a mindset when I rip myself away from video games at midnight because I need a write. Like you just, it's intentionality meets focus, and having a clear vision for where you want to go.
Yeah, that's a fantastic definition, and wanted to thank you everyone for listening to the Callis Mindset. If today's conversation gave you clarity, new perspective, please share it with someone who would enjoy it. And a big thank you to Andrew Freeman for joining the show and sharing insight on his creativity, storytelling, and the mindset behind building meaningful work. If you want to explore Andrew's work, visit his website, andrewfreeman.online, and check out all of his work and the creative that he brings to the world. And if you want more conversations like this one about discipline, growth, leadership, and mindset, follow our show. Keep leading yourself and keep choosing discipline. We'll see you next time.